So if the committee, after seeing the version of S60 that Mike has put together at our request, if the committee is comfortable with everything there, then we will go ahead and vote it out, I think. If anybody has any concerns, I don't think we need to rush it through today. There are several changes that we asked you to do, I think, last week, Mike, and then you've got sections highlighted that we had previously had to do. So I think the changes are all going to be here. And why don't we just have you, I guess, start at the top and go through it again?
Okay. This is Michael Grady with Ledge Council. You should be looking at draft 2.2, an April 21st date and a 1:15 timestamp. The first change is on page 3. It's in the definition of eligible weather condition. You've seen this before. You wanted to clarify that was from a forest fire or wildfire event. So that change remains in there. Next change is on page 4. Page you wanted to clarify because of the potential variation of corporate entities that could be applying. You wanted to be clear that it's persons owning farms and forestry operations. This person is defined in Title I, the default definition, and includes every form of corporate entity that you can think of. And then for the maximum award, you wanted to allow for up to a maximum annual award of 5% of the undesignated and unreserved funds, provided that the award shall not exceed $150,000 per qualified applicant farm or forestry operation per year. So even if 5% is more than 150, the applicant, the farm or forestry operation only gets $150,000.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, John. Does that 5%, I think, and maybe I should ask the committee if we all agree, if it starts with $1 million, 5% is 50,000. And there's an event and 10 awards for 50,000 get given, so it's down to 500,000. The rest of that will still be 5% of the original million. Is that how this is worded? Because I think that's how we wanted it. We didn't want to break it down to now 5% of 500,000. We wanted to leave it at the original amount that started in there.
Well, it's the undesignated and unreserved funds, which should be
At the start of the fiscal year.
at the start of the fiscal year. That's probably what it should be.
Okay.
So I think I think that's a good question, and I think you've expressed what our intent, or what the committee's intent was. So let's just, be sure the language reflects that. We don't want to be diminishing 5% of whatever's left.
Exactly.
Should be setting, basically, you know what the maximum award can be at the beginning of
For
the fiscal year.
fiscal year.
Okay.
Makes math.
Okay, should I move on?
Yes.
The next change is halfway down the page. I previously said loss is reimbursable by a grant. We're going to move the payment. So these are going to be the beneficiary payments. It's recommended by JFO. In the list of losses reimbursable, the chair asked that I clarify that repair washed out or otherwise damaged logging roads would be available or eligible for reimbursement. And similarly, inability to access harvested timber due to flooding or other weather conditions.
So let's just pause there. Thank you. We talked yesterday. I wanted to have the committee look at this and see whether you thought that covered the forestry sector piece here. So the list, if you go back to the top of the list, it includes wages and wages or other ongoing, or wages or compensation. So that is not restricted to farm. That would also be logging wages.
Okay. And subcontractors are all already forestry operations, or most of them would qualify, so they could apply on their own.
Representative Lipsky.
To give some context to those, if you scroll inability to access harvested timber due to flooding or other weather conditions. Harvested, so let's assume it went from the stump to the landing. It was either forwarded or bucked at the landing and ranked up there. Now, some species, whether if you couldn't get to them for 2 or 3 months, things like hemlock or cherry don't seem to degrade. But pine, if it's hot weather, it's very vulnerable to a thing called blue stain, which is a mold. And if it goes in through the cambium and probably about 25% in, they are no meal take blue stain bombs. So that's an example. Other species like sugar maple, they stain also. White and yellow birch stain in hot weather. And that mold that goes into the log takes it, devalues it significantly. So that would be an example of a loss if they were not able to access. Those trees were standing attached to a stump, they would have been fine, but they were harvested, but because of the weather, the flooding event became inaccessible. So I'll leave it at that I think that's relevant. It's not necessarily that widely.
Go ahead.
So like the feller buncher might have cut these trees, put them in bunches, right? But weather comes, you know. Is that what we're talking about? They're harvested.
They're harvested, but usually there's a feller bunch or harvest. Either a large grapple skidder will get these bunches and bring them to a landing, and they're processed with either a slasher saw with a loader and sorted by use or value and ranked up on the landing. Or if they're harvested and cut to length and they're forwarded out, they're at the landing. But a tree attached to a top in a somewhat shaded environment likely would not be as vulnerable. That's not ready to go to market. There's also a thing called bugs, pine borer. It gets in warm weather and will go at 22 caliber. It would go right through a pine log this big. So those are why the product could be devalued.
I guess one of my questions, if a tree is cut, then that's considered harvested, or what we call it, just out of curiosity, because that's.
So definition question.
Of harvested.
There's no definition of harvest, but that's how it's been interpreted in DFPR, their jurisdiction and their statute. The word there is when it's been, it's got another qualifier, harvested or processed.
I think if it was detached from its food source, it's considered harvested.
Right. And process would be either bought with a chainsaw, with a slasher saw, or with a harvester process.
Representative Boston, did you have a
No.
question earlier? Okay.
Should I move on?
Yeah, let's move on.
You have the year-end report of income and expenses. You need to clarify that the forestry operation is also required to do that as well as the farm. You moved away from what you were looking at for having applications processed on a quarterly basis and then rolling over unspent. You're just going back to the language as originally proposed. It may be made at any time, and the secretary may only close the application process upon award of all appropriated funds for the relevant fiscal year. I do want to. Do you still have the modifier language in here?
Okay, yeah, I was gonna ask because I think we did that.
You want that out?
This was this, just for the committee's sake, you may recall, we discussed the concern, first of all, that we didn't have a way to measure the median net income. And that even if we did, it seemed like we weren't comfortable including that provision.
Moving on page 7, again, line 1, change from grant to payment. In the board, adding the commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation or designee, and then 2 forestry operators. And then clarifying what the conflict of interest standard is and allowing the secretary to may appoint an alternate member to maintain a quorum when there's a conflict of interest. And then the last is in the request for redesignation or retitling of the bill that it removed the word grant to payments, and then you rename the fund as well. It had previously been the Farm Security Special Fund, now Farm and Forestry Operations Security Fund. So those are the changes.
Okay, Representative O'Brien?
Mike, I can't remember, did we define forestry operator?
You define forestry operations, and by the cross-reference to 10 VSA 2602, which is what the Department of Forest and Parks has jurisdiction over. And let me see if I can find that definition.
I just wondered if it would be, just loggers, or could it be a forester who's sort of running a
It's
timber harvest
Not-
property owner and
just loggers. Hold on a second.
You mean like a forester that's heading out and you get all these subcontractors? I think that would count as well.
This is the existing definition of forestry operations.
Yep. Activities related to the management of forests, including a timber harvest, pruning, planting, reforestation, pest disease and invasive species control, wildlife habitat management, and fertilization. It includes the primary processing of forest products on a parcel where the timber harvest occurs.
that gives the board quite a bit of freedom to.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say that overall we have feels like we've been fairly intentional about delegating some leeway to the board, and then I've been saying, and don't forget that the board then is going to be asked to weigh in and report back to us on any thoughts that they have. Is that written into the bill? Mike, can you just?
The board.
Will report.
Yeah.
They are supposed to annually recommend to you ways to improve the effectiveness of the fund.
So that's in exchange for the leeway, then we'll ask them to give us that report.
Two things. Just on that last thought, I think it's very important that they report back to where the money comes from. Big discussion in the Monterey Motion Council, because that money's been going out, and for 10 years, nothing's been reported back. And it's under statute that it's reported back to us. And it's going to be now, but they got all wrinkled because they haven't been doing it. They want to know why they have to do it. It's
Out
not
of the
money.
practice or out of the habit, yeah.
Yeah, and so we said, hey, the state's not looking to take your money because it's dairy farmers' money, but our due diligence is to look at where it's spent. The only other comment I have, and again, if I'm the only one having this comment, y'all can throw rocks at me.
We're peaceful outfit.
Well, you haven't heard my comment yet. Should we have a quick visit like from Ag and Forest and Parks as to having a board instead of having them do it? Would they be able to go faster if it was just those two agencies working together to get the money out versus having a board try to come together and get the money out? That's the only other comment I have.
Representative Morgan.
That of this whole thing, that's my only concern. I have reservations about the board. I just don't know that it's most expedient as far as getting money out to the people.
Representative O'Brien.
Can I ask Maddie a question?
Uh,
Pay attention.
Wait a minute, wait a minute, are
I'll
you,
wait for the share.
yeah, are you okay with being asked a question?
It's
Okay.
relevant.
Yeah.
No, I just wondered, like, the money that went out to the NOFA's emergency fund.
Mhm.
Is that board, is it a sitting board, or did you get it together really fast and they got money out really fast?
It's a sitting board that, for the record, Maddie Kempner, NOFA, it's a sitting board that was already assembled. And then we basically tap them, in our case, when there's either a single application or a major event, and they come together and review the applications.
So would this sort of be a sitting board then? That's ready to go essentially?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they're not here literally.
Right.
In the building across the street, waiting for a flood, but they would be on call,
I just want to comment on the points that the reps Derby made. We're having FPR, I think, visiting our committees the next day or two.
this afternoon.
And later today, and it would be them at their capacity, to move quickly if they had personnel.
So
And we could ask.
Could I just interject?
yes, please.
You have timeframes in here that are some of the most expedient I've ever seen for a board. They have to, within 15 days, review. And then once approved, within 15 days, the money has to be moved. Like that is quick.
That's a torch.
Right? And so I would say normally, Representative Morgan, you're right, a agency is going to move faster than a board. But you're telling this board to move faster than an agency right now. And so, yeah, and so that's going to be interesting.
And I will share my thoughts on the comments here in a second. But now I'm remembering last meeting, we had a conversation about making sure that the agency had the capacity by appropriating a portion of the funding. And I wonder if that got in here.
That is not in here either. Do you want up to how much?
Yeah,
I think that's a question for the agencies to see what they thought, if it's gonna be that. And they don't know, depends on how many events there are perhaps, but.
I think we had felt, since nobody really knows, that we could use the same language that we had in the
Vermonters feeding Vermonter.
Vermonters, yeah.
So I think that was up to 67,000.
Half of, yeah, happened. So, and I will just say, summarizing what I think the committee's heard on this question so far is that the Agency of Agriculture, which is the agency that would be overseeing things here, and the Secretary of the Agency of Agriculture has, the final authority based on recommendations from the board, that the Agency of Agriculture would prefer that there weren't a board. I think they've already testified to that, and we've heard that indirectly. The farmers, part of the coalition anyway, that put together the bill, feel strongly that there should be a board. So we've got two different two different perspectives there from the stakeholders. And when this has come up, I think that the committee has weighed those and said, let's move ahead with the language that we have now with the board. So we can, I think we've got a couple of changes. Maybe we want to, rather than push through a vote on a draft that we don't have actually in front of us, we can hold off and might come back with those changes. And if the committee wants to continue the conversation and go back to that conversation about the board, we can do that as well. I do want to just say, though, that typically, I think it's good practice that if we come to a place where the committee is saying, yep, this is the direction we're going to go, or make this choice, we probably don't want to be reopening that conversation every time there's a difference of opinion, because there will be differences of opinion.
There will be, and it's just a question I've had, and we haven't heard from. Did Nicole report on this to us? And
Yes, she, I think, was the one who came in for the agency.
and we haven't heard from, of course, FPNR on the board versus them doing it. It's just a question I have. I'm not gonna jump on my sword over it.
I don't want to drag this out, but this is a question for Councilor O'Grady. In the governor or the administrative branch, they have boards and commission or section that the governor appoints, whether it's to an Act 250 board. Would this be part of the administration's role, or would this be the agency's role?
It's both. The board is created at the agency, but the agency is part of the executive branch. Now, you've designated who is appointing these. Generally, it's the Secretary of Agriculture or their members by their office. So this is basically an executive branch board.
So the language that we have right on the board, that the board is composed of, and it lists the people, and then
all of the appointments are made by the Secretary of Agriculture.
Like the state chief recovery officer, is that an appointed position for a certain amount of time, or is that generally follows like an Irene or July?
No, they have a position for that now. It's Doug Farnham.
And he serves at the behest of the governor until otherwise.
I think they created it when Sue Minter did it after Irene, and it's been there since. So any other changes?
So I think we've got two changes. Just so that we're not.
I think there's three.
Three?
Yeah, so you're going to allow up to 67,000 from the fund to be used for administrative purposes by the agency.
Yeah.
You're going to strike the modifier based on median net income.
Right.
You're going to clarify that the award, it's the undesignated and unreserved funds at the beginning of the fiscal
Okay,
year.
it's good. If that needs to be clarified, that would be helpful. So I'm gonna, those are the changes. I think we have then the board is, the creation of the board language is in there right now. The concern has been raised a couple of times. We can talk about that, and I think maybe it would be helpful to talk to the individual members, to talk to the stakeholders too, with those concerns. That might be a good next step. You have another meeting to get to, I think, Mike? Okay. So we'll figure out a time to have you come back in, just for a short enough time to do a vote then.
Yeah.
Next day or two. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dick.
It's Mike. So we have a few minutes before Steve Collier comes in to talk about the S45. And I think maybe we can use that time to talk if there's anything that folks want to talk about on S60. Heather's here, okay, good. Or we can just take a break from the meeting and come back in a few minutes and move on to that next bill.
I think we've done a great job with that 60. The only question I have is on how the board's made up, if it's a board or just done by the agencies. That's the only question I have left. That's it. None.
Okay, well, I would suggest maybe I'll talk to you, Richard, and point you in the right direction. People that you could talk to who might help you with that question. The only question I have is who's going to report this bill? And I haven't had a conversation with anybody about it, so I will use the break time maybe to try and figure that out.
How many pages is it?
10.
Could maybe be two people even, or do you think it should be one person?
It's pretty straightforward. I think it could be one. Although we did a good job of tag teaming this morning. Downstairs. We had in our Democratic caucus, we had a great presentation of the bill.
Or anyone on the committee was not.
Yes, yes, I think we've had 4 bills so far, so there's.
I had a very complex one. Well,
Ooh, it hasn't presented yet, have you? I don't think.
all of other applicants that.
I like watching John stand up there when he's addressing the speaker. He puts the serious cloak on.
His hands are not.
No, his hands are gripped right down on the desk and
Heather hasn't done one this year, has she?
No.
She might be good as a farmer, like.
It doesn't have really a division where it makes sense for Jen to do the forest operations part, does it?
If people start questioning the reporter, the presenter, someone,
Heather could yield to you or whoever presents.
you know, they could if they want to throw me in.
I'll get it, what I'll get.
All right, why don't we